Okay. I think I can see people are still walking in from the greater chat outside, but I think we can start maybe in about 10 minutes. We are the last bastion of the three-day conference, staying here undeterred. And so first thing I would like to do is to ask you to join me in having a sparing a thought for all those who have left us and they will miss the great finale of the conference, right? So, part of the great finale is a roundtable. And the title I have here is, let me see, Use of Indicators in Policy and Inclusive Metrics. Now, why this topic? And I would think there are two main reasons. One is because the use of indicators in policy is somehow, I think, a distinctive factor, a distinctive characteristic of this conference series. This is one of the things we are about, and that maybe other conferences are not. And because this is a distinctive factor, we thought it would be becoming to end up with a reflection about what is a core concern of this community. So that's one reason. The second reason is that it's good to end a conference thinking about the future. And I think that talking about use of indicators is thinking about the future. Why? Well, because in the plenaries, I would say almost all the plenaries and many sessions, I think I can say that we sense an element of dissatisfaction and concern in our community about the use, the policy use that is being made of the indicators we develop and we work with. And if we have a dissatisfaction, this means that we have to think about So we have Richard Deiss, did I pronounce that correctly? I'm terrible pronouncing things, I must say, from the European Commission. I know I've been told that your trajectory in working with indicators in the European Commission is unparalleled. I think you have been many years doing this stuff, so welcome. Slavo Radosevic, which will offer us a perspective mainly from things from innovation indicators, and will share with us some experience from Eastern Europe. Hicks, the leading author of the Leiden Manifesto, of which we have talked repeatedly in this conference and in many other places so many other times. I think Diana would tell us something about how to take forward the Leiden Manifesto, or maybe how not to take it forward, the Leiden Manifesto. I'm looking forward to that. And then Judith Sutz from Uruguay, president of Globelics. I think if you have been in this conference, you know her, because we have been abusing of her kindness since she arrived in Valencia. I must share with you that on Monday, our first thing we did was a visit to the regional government, and she was there with us. So she was the first to start, and she's going to be the last to leave. And in between, she got plenty of plenaries and activity. So with my apologies to Judith for abusing of her kindness, she will give us what I can think is a more global perspective, channel perspective, and this touch of being, as one says, from the global south. So what we will do is we will start with a short presentation. I have here 5 minutes, but now it's towards the end of the conference. I'm a relaxed guy. I will not be showing red cards or clicking glasses or everything. So you yourself keep your time. Short presentation of about 5 minutes as an opening salvo, and then we'll see what we do. And I give the word first to Richard.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting the European Commission and myself to this conference and also to the podium. I have worked since a long time. I'm in the European Commission at the moment in DG Research and Innovation, or since 4 years. And in this meeting, I have already met in this conference several people whom I worked with in these 4 years, the Commission is spending every year over 10 billion for research and development in Europe via Horizon 2020. And a few million of these 10 billion go into call for tenders on science and technology indicator studies. And these studies are done often in our unit. And therefore, we meet experts in Europe in these areas. And examples are a study we did a few years ago on science and technology in China. China is an important competitor, a very strongly growing competitor. And therefore, we wanted to know what's going on there. And so someone I met here doing this study on China, and then we did a study on high growth enterprises. This is also a politically very important topic because we want to understand better why Europe is not doing so well in transforming science and technology into innovation and growth. The US is much better there. The US has more scale-up companies, all these GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, or NATO, Netflix, Airbnb, Tesla, Uber, and so on. So the US is more successful. Europe is lagging behind. How do we understand that, or what's behind it? So we did a study on that, and I came across one of the contractors of this study in this meeting here. Then we did a study on bird flows, on investment in research and development from abroad. And this study we did 5 years ago, and we have tendered it again a few years ago. And I came also across the contractor doing this study in this meeting. And that's important to understand research and development expenditure, because in smaller countries often it comes from multinational companies from abroad. And then we are doing also a study on patents and bibliometrics. Together with a consortium where CWTS is involved, and of course we have several people from CWTS here, and we are doing this important bibliometric work. And the bibliometric information that we are using in our science and technology report was always coming from studies. Eurostat has not done something on it. They say we have no expertise on it, so we don't cover bibliometrics. And so if we want to use bibliometric figures, we go via contracts, and in the past we had contracts with a Canadian company, Science Metrics. Now we have a new contract with CWTS. That's an important area to measure performance, and so we are doing our study on that. And then we have also representatives from a joint research center that's part of a commission that is also doing a study, a project called Innova Measure with several work packages. And then we have someone here also from UNO Merit, who is working for the Commission on the European Innovation Scoreboard. That's an important indicator-based assessment of the performance of countries in innovation. That's based on 25 indicators. That's a very popular system. Many member states, many governments can't wait until it's published. They call us around the month of publication. They call us all the time and say, when does it come out? We want to see our performance. And then member states are classified into 4 groups in this ranking, and they are very impatient and curious to see the results. So these are a couple of projects we are doing in our unit in DG Research and Innovation. And we see in general in the Commission that indicators, data and indicators are becoming more important, because in many areas we are at the end of the legislative pipeline. We have exhausted the possibilities to adopt new legislation, and therefore we are working more with other tools like benchmarking countries, like agreeing on common targets like the 3% target. And then we need a lot of statistical information to monitor performance of countries and progress of countries as regards these benchmarks. And this we see in different areas. I have worked in the areas of transport, in information society, in education, and in research and innovation. And in education it was also always very important, because in education there's no legal basis for the activities of a commission apart from mobility, and therefore indicators are very important to convince countries that there's a need to act that they should increase performance, And there had been a lot of developments together with other international organizations such as the OECD, which launched the PISA study on performance of school pupils, also other organizations, and we cooperated always closely to use this data to help member states to understand their performance. And in science and technology, we are working also with reports, indicator-based reports. And when I came to DG Research and Innovation 4 years ago, I found that we had a very big report. It was 750 pages. It was really a brick. It looked like a brick. And it was very sophisticated. But people started to feel this is already too detailed, too comprehensive. It was a biennial publication every 2 years, but 750 pages. It was a lot of work for the Commission to produce it, but also a lot of work for member states to read it. And in the last years, member states came to us and said, all these reports, all these reporting obligations, that's simply too much. Also, we have to look at the whole picture. The OECD is producing reports, the Commission is producing reports, everybody's analyzing performance. That's a little bit too much, especially small countries are overloaded with that. And in the next presidency, which is Malta, which is a very small administration, we have also this initiative to ask the Commission to streamline things. And 2 years after this very big publication with 750 pages, we split it into 2 publications. One, an overview publication, and one, a country-level publication, giving results for each country that was useful to monitor the situation in each country. And then we thought, okay, in the future we do it like this. Every 2 years this overview, and every year this country-level publication. And in 2015-16, we prepared the 3rd edition, and then we dropped already the country-level publication because countries felt this was too much for them to absorb all this information, and we just focused on this horizontal overview. And Slavo was contributing to it. It had a more indicator-based part and a more analytical part, and Slavo wrote one of the chapters. And this shows a little bit something that I've seen often in a commission, that you start with a new policy, a new responsibility of European Union after changing the treaties, for example, in areas like transport and areas like research and innovation. And then you develop new policies, and then you need a lot of data to monitor these policies. But then data and indicators have the purpose of reducing complexity, to understand better what's going on, because it's very complex to analyze research and innovation. So indicators help you. And at the beginning, you have few indicators, and then people start to feel this is not doing justice to the complexity. You need more indicators, and then the number of indicators is growing and growing until it reaches a critical point where people suddenly feel this is too much, this is too complex, it doesn't reduce complexity anymore, and then suddenly the indicator number collapses to a core set of indicators. And then in the long term, this core set of indicators grows again, and then until it reaches again a critical mass. So we see this, sometimes we see also relatively short policy cycles in the Commission. New people come, a new Commission starts, and then new buzzwords, new strategies come. And for example, in 2009, the Europe 2020 strategy was developed with goals for Europe 2020 flagship initiatives, and one flagship initiative was Innovation Union. And then all publications in this field were renamed Innovation Union. For example, the Innovation Union Scoreboard. And then our publication was called Innovation Union Competitiveness Report. And then in 2014, the new commission, the Juncker Commission, came. And the new people had new ideas and considered the old terminology attached to the old commission. And we asked to remove this terminology. And then we had, again, to rename all the publications to remove the word Innovation Union, which first we were asked to. This shows that policy life cycles are relatively short, maybe sometimes only 5 years. And, but we see also that although indicators come and go, and indicators lists come and go, and there is always a need for certain core indicators. For example, R&D expenditure is so important, that will always be there. And we will always have to measure performance in research and maybe also innovation, and for that we need something like bibliometric data. At the same time, we know that this is not doing justice to new developments like social media and so on. We need new indicators, and it takes a lot of time to develop these new indicators. And the problem is always, until we have developed these new indicators, policies have often changed already. And therefore, it's important to further work on a solid core set of data, and for this shorter life cycles, one has to be very flexible. And maybe not do it with statistical offices, because they work very slowly, but to work with the research community, with contractors directly. And one thing that is also special about the European Commission is that we can do legislation. We can create the legal basis for creating statistical data, and that has been done also in the past a lot. Eurostat is the body, Eurostat is our DG that is creating these legal acts together with member states, and then member states are obliged to produce this data. But currently there's a strong pressure of member states to focus this on really the core sets of data. And yeah, I think anyhow I have to stop here now. You can talk about everything, but not about 20 minutes or something. We will see in the discussion, things come up, and then we can go into these areas in more detail. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Without further ado, it's Slavo's turn. Let's see if the computer works.
Thank you. You hear me? This was not supposed to be kind of full-scale presentation, because this is a panel, but I prepare something just to be more systematic. I take examples where basically chasing indicator becomes a policy, because the session is about the use of indicators. Indicators are so dominant today in policy that very often policy is not trying to improve situation and then checking whether they have done well through a range of indicators, but the indicator itself becomes a policy. And that's a qualitatively a new situation. I'll take example from periphery. I could take more from the core, but core always has a subtle, while periphery has that kind of bluntly, it strikes you with the extremity of it. And then I'll conclude briefly based on that. Two brief examples on which I'm working now, so I shouldn't be actually presenting this now because I'm still engaged in these countries, but Bulgaria is a country on European periphery. It has a smart specialization strategy where there's lots of money to be invested there, and strategic goal of the government is to move from the group of modest innovator to group of moderate innovator. So this is the explicit policy goal. It's not like we'll be doing this and these things, and then if we move to the higher group, fine. No, we want to be there. And that means that they literally take the conceptual frameworks from the scoreboard. They have these categories, subcategories, so Hugo Hollander should be very happy because it's so important in that country. And then you try to pitch the measures according to specific subgroups and how much you want to improve. So that's a kind of really indicator becomes a direct policy objective. Another example would be a country even further from on the European periphery, Belarus, which you probably know nothing, but is an extremely interesting case, which has explicit aim in the national strategy to enter into top 40 countries into Human Development Index, top 30 in Doing Business Index, top 30 in ICT Index, where the government basically has very explicit targets and does annual analysis of 200, 300 pages where they are on different indicators and what they have to do in order to improve on specific indicators so that in the overall, after a few years, they will be at specific levels. So that is another example where the policy where the indicator becomes a direct policy objective. You couldn't go further more than that, Now, what are the positive things about that? Positive things are first that it reflects a genuine wish of the country to improve. There's nothing wrong with that. People have to then choose performance targets which are easily understood. So they kind of serve as a motivating device. It gives an international position of the country, and it gives a kind of critical, unbiased view of different sectoral interests, what is good, what is bad. You take something which is outside, which seems more objective. But what are the problems? Problem is that you take indicators at face value and forgetting that basically indicators are, behind them is a certain conceptual approach, certain understanding, level of development, institutional context, and you tend to ignore then institutional and income differences. For example, European Innovation Scoreboard was designed originally to compare where the EU is in relation to US. If you say, no, now I'm going to use it to see where is Bulgaria in relation to Germany, well, sorry, I mean, you would probably have to use some modification of that, something which would be more appropriate in that context. But you tend to ignore that. So let me point my 3 crucial kind of challenges when policy takes that. First is what I already mentioned, that indicators are poor proxies of the real processes, strengths, and weaknesses. We know very often as a researcher, you see complexity of the world, and you try to find indicator, and you are, desperate how these are imperfect proxies. And you're faced with that complexity of the real world. So their approximation of underlying categories and cannot be used always as a direct policy target. Second is that even if you achieve or aim one specific indicator to achieve the target, the issue is, will that lead you to your desired result? If you improve on R&D, does it mean really that your country GDP will go up? We know, the whole complexity of econometrics, of proving what is the correlation, what is the causation. So the achievement itself of that objective does not mean, that you will achieve the desired outcome. And finally, because these are international benchmarks, you inevitably have to homogenize and standardize drivers of growth across countries. You tend to neglect institutional differences, income differences, and therefore, you try to have one approach which is fitting all. And of course, then you are maybe targeting, which is not the most relevant thing for you. You basically maybe targeting somebody else's target, so to say, kind of. So why I'm skeptical on that is also on the ground of a kind of complexity of the issue, where complex goals, for example, a country wants to be improving very much on the Global Innovation Index. Complex goal like this cannot be achieved by directly targeting indicators where country ranks below. I will refer her to, if you haven't come across a book by a British economist, John Kay, is an extremely nice book on obliquity, which is the idea that when you have a complex objectives in life, you can never achieve the objectives by targeting them directly. You always have to do it indirectly. And it's an extremely nice philosophical piece, which is extremely relevant for our area. And just to quote him, John Kay points out, directness is appropriate when the environment is stable and objectives are one-dimensional and transparent. Now, none of the objectives in the Global Innovation Index are of that nature. They are multi-dimensional, they interact with each other, and there are different trade-offs. So in a sense, trying to achieve directly objective is in itself self-defeating in complex cases like innovation capacity of a country. Because I'm running out of time, let me just conclude briefly in a nutshell what is the basic message that I would like to convey for this discussion. I would advise against targeting individual specific indicators with the aim to improve the overall rankings. They should be taken as proxies of the situation and really taken as a proxy, and then you choose the most relevant, considered effective solutions around that proxy. And these actions in turn will indirectly result in improved indicators and rankings rather than targeting them directly. Yes, I'm not against benchmarking. Benchmarking should be done as much as possible, but the aim of benchmarking should be to understand better issues and challenges rather than to reduce policies on achieving target levels of specific indicators. The bottom line is that indicators should inform policy, but only rarely should they become policy targets. And I can give you numerous other examples where I see the side effects of it. Thank you.